Hello there everyone, I got some good news here. So as you might have noticed in the video, this is obviously going to be Darkest Dungeon 2 Changes Part 1, and what that means is we're going to mostly go over the mechanics and the style of the game and how that's changing, and then the second video, which I plan on doing Friday, I'll actually go more in depth about my opinion and all that. It might come out Saturday depending on how busy my Friday is, but I definitely Saturday at the latest I'm going to get the video out. And the second part of this, I am happy to say I'm going to be doing a joint video with Shuffle. We'll probably just do it over Discord or something like that. But we're going to talk about the changes, our opinions of it, what else we can maybe look forward to in Darkest Dungeon 2. Shufflefm does a lot of Darkest Dungeon 2 content. He's going to do a lot of Darkest Dungeon 2 content, I assume. He said he's done a lot of Darkest Dungeon content. Anything ranging from entertainment, guides, tier videos, helping out individuals. So he has a huge array of videos on Darkest Dungeon and other games as well. So he's not just a strictly Darkest Dungeon channel. If you haven't heard of him before, definitely go check him out. Though most likely more people have heard of him than me. So if you have found this channel, welcome. But if you also have not found Shuffles, feel free to check him out as well. Let's just get one of the biggest changes out of the way right now. One of the biggest changes I think they're doing is that they're going to have more of a Slay the Spire, Faster Than Light / Hades run style. And if you've never played any of those games, you're going to be like, that makes no sense to me. Those are actually traditional roguelike games in the sense that you really never keep much of your progress from each game. Some of them you do, but for the most part, it's always starting a new run, such as Darkest Dungeon. Even though you play one big campaign that's probably 40 to 50 hours at most, and I can't remember where they said in the article, I think they said the average run's going to be about 7 hours, so maybe plus or minus 2 on that. So you're looking at anywhere between maybe 5 and 9 hours for what we now call a run. I will talk about that more on Friday or Saturday. I'm just letting you know what the developers and the direction of this game to this article is at least saying. So it's no longer going to be one long drawn out campaign. It's going to be, from my perception of this, it's going to be much more about the run rather than the end goal, I'm going to call it, I guess. I'll talk about a little more as we talk about more of the mechanics you're going to see. But as of right now, there was definitely a mentality shift. And let's just go into it now since it's a nice segue. Your characters are going to be more interactive with each other and the environment from what it seems. And what I mean by that is heroes are going to have effects in tandem, I guess I'm going to call it. Such as when they get an affliction, you know how they would usually make fun of each other, sometimes pass their turn, maybe attack a teammate. Well, sounds like they're going to try that a little bit as well, the normal, but they're also going to try to reverse that. They're going to have something where like maybe 2 people attack one enemy, or maybe someone defends somebody else, or someone stress heals somebody. Like, your characters are going to be much more buddy-buddy interpersonal. You're going to build theoretical relationships. And the way I was getting at that was through, like, I guess what would be the stress system. So your heroes aren't going to necessarily have, like, afflictions anymore. I know at one point they said they're going to have, like, a meltdown or something that's going to reset all relationships. So as I said, and I will get more in depth on this on Friday and Saturday as I get a chance to read through the article one more time, because there is a lot in here, but at the same time, there's only really a few major key points. Most of the other stuff is just comparisons. We're referencing the old game. Once again, you're going to be developing those relationships, and those relationships can be really good or they can be really nasty. So if you have a really bad relationship, triggering this said meltdown will actually be helpful. But if you have a lot of good relationships where maybe people are helping you attack, defend, stress heal you, obviously having that meltdown is going to be a huge detriment. So it might be the new, like, zero stress people are more like your really good relationship. So if you're not necessarily great at the game, you're going to have a bunch of people who don't like each other, which could have happened in the first Darkest Dungeon as well. Now, that's mostly for the character aspect. Once again, I'll bring up a little more. There is a little bit more we can bring up, but right now I don't want to completely overload. I want to just show some examples and stuff of what the people will actually look like. So I'm going to go back here and pull up a combat system here. So this is what the new combat's going to look like. It's much more, how do I want to say it? I don't want to say it's shiny, but it's much more mobile feeling. And also they went 3D and reduced the head size. And I will eventually find, and I know where to look for it, a comment about where the overall team felt very passionate about not having oversized heads. I'm not sure why that was really a concern of theirs. I never really noticed or thought it was an issue in Darkest Dungeon, but we'll move on to that. If you played a great deal of Darkest Dungeon, this is a direct line. It will look strikingly different. It's in 3D now, which, once again, I'll talk about on Friday, Saturday. And for one thing, as a whole rest of the game, characters have bigger bodies and smaller heads, no longer cartoonishly portioned. That's a direct line from the article. Once again, I never thought that was a huge issue, but anyways, there's really amazing preparatory animations in combat. If you click Wicked Slice on your highwayman, he whips out his knife and gets ready to attack. I mean, that's pretty cool. I think I would have enjoyed that, maybe minus like the 3D. You already know where I'm going with my opinion of that. I'm not a huge fan of 3D. It really reminds me of like Iratus, I think Lord of the Dead, and I think Cold Vambrace is technically 3D. Both of those games' art styles don't particularly do it for me, but that's my opinion. I'll talk about that more later. Maybe some people like it. And just real quick, while the way the article is set up is there's two things. We're going to talk about levels, and that's actually near the end of the article. I'm a little surprised, but if you've played Hades, Faster Than Light, and other games as those, such as Slay the Spire as well, you'll know in those games you progress in levels, and that's what you're going to do in Darkest Dungeon. You're going to have what they're calling acts. You're going to have 5 acts of bosses, and I think that ends. You might have 5 acts, then a final boss. Not entirely sure yet, but it is what it is. Another thing is, it looks like you're going to physically drive a stagecoach down the road. Now, I don't know if that's just more for fun, or if that's actually going to be like something where it takes necessarily skill, where you need to turn left and right. I know at some points, I believe characters say that they're going to vote which direction you go. So I'm assuming you're going to do a dungeon, get on a road, and then pick left or right. So it's just like you're going to have a dungeon inside of a dungeon, maybe. Not entirely sure, because I don't think they go too much in depth on that. So that will be something interesting. And as I keep saying, your characters are going to create more of a story rather than being immersed in a story, I guess I'll say. Your characters should be creating the memories and their interactions and how they survive rather than possibly the trip itself. That's not completely 100% true. However, that is the feel I'm getting from the developers and the guy directing this game. Now we're going to go over who's who, and it's going to get the early access. And oh gosh, I forgot to say, early access is coming out, I believe they said Q3. So it should be about 3 months from now. Should be on Epic Games as well. I can't count. There's 8 from the last game, 1 new one. So yes, there are 9 characters, but only 8 original returning. And I have them up on the screen here. Grave Robber, Cultist, Plague Doctor, Man-at-Arms, Leopard, Jester, Highwayman, and Hellion. The only person I'm really sad they didn't bring back is my boy, the Crusader, but they are going to add more as the game progresses, so I don't know if they'll bring back older characters, where from essentially you only get 8 and you're going to move on. So I'm not entirely sure which direction that is going to go, but as of right now, we have only 8 originals. And this is another thing that they said of those 8 originals. And this is the part where I need to just see the game. I don't necessarily know if I understand it, or if I understand it and I'm just not maybe a huge fan of it. You're only going to have 1 of every class. So the people you have are going to be infinitely more important, once again, that relationship building, than just picking 3 or 4 highwaymen, not caring about their name, not caring about their skills or quirks, and just tossing them out. I really think Darkest Dungeon tried to put that away. They didn't want this to be a grind-heavy game. They wanted this to be a, like I said, 5 to 9 hours, and then you go for it. I'm going to show one comparison before we get into some big gameplay changes. So they actually have a comparison of the new game to the old game. Hopefully it doesn't come up too stuff. So you can kind of see where they were going with Darkest Dungeon 2 based on kind of the comments they're making and the numbers here. And I'm going to show you this slide/section because I really want to just kind of drill in the fact of like what you can expect they were focusing on. And once again, I'm not trying to say this is good or bad right now. I just want to show you where the game is progressing to. So like I said, they came back to this normal size head thing. If you come down to 9, they say big head. Alamo says it's like a bad thing, but like I get it, his head is technically huge for the character's body, but like I don't know if it makes my game better. So it's a very interesting choice. Sophisticated skeleton, and then they said dumb skeleton. Once again, I'm pretty confused on some of the stuff they were focusing on right now. 3, the background, look, the world's boring, and then they go, oh, look, a dungeon. Once again, I don't know. Yeah, you can already kind of tell how I feel about some of the stuff they're trying to highlight, like, oh, look how much cooler it is, and it's like, okay, I don't know. Turn order offers a bit of foresight, which I kind of liked. I don't know what they're trying to say. Okay, they didn't really mention much. So yeah, they have a turn order now, which I guess allows you to be more tactful, but I kind of like the randomization because you could essentially predict when people would go. So you didn't really need the game to handhold you and say, well, this is gonna be the exact order. Prepare. No, I mean, I think it's gonna make the game maybe a little easier or less, how I want to say it, less surprising, but maybe not. Once again, that'll be my opinion. The stress and health meters are virtually identical. I just think they mean, they don't have them separated as much, so it'll probably be more fluid than it will be boxy, which is fine. Doesn't really matter. It's stylistic. Okay, so they're showing this block token, and you're probably wondering, what the heck does this mean? We will get into that soon. Like I said, that's one of the major changes, and then we're going to come down here. Oh, we also get to choose 5 abilities. That was something else I was trying to hold off on too, but that's whatever. So yes, you'll get 5 abilities. Yeah, oh, look a dungeon, big head, dumb skeleton. No need for dungeon layout in the combat screen. That one I don't really care about. I mean, it's whatever. And this is another huge game. Darkest Dungeon 2 doesn't have these gear slots, but you can still equip them. Oh, I think they mean during fighting. So yeah, there's a lot of huge changes. We're actually into the main meat of the mechanical gameplay now, which is why I wanted this to be a 2-part video, because this is where it could get very long. I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, but still get you, I think, what are the biggest points. So I think one of the bigger points is going to be characters no longer have upgradable armors or weapons. So this is going to highly depend on, I'm assuming, A, skill upgrades, and B, huge trinket buffs. And I mean just massive. The amount of trinkets are going to get reduced, which is, I think, a great decision, because about 90% of the trinkets from the first Darkest Dungeon are just irrelevant. So I think reducing those trinkets down to something manageable is actually a really smart deal. Now, the next thing that they kind of got rid of, which we'll talk about it, accuracy is done. You're just going to hit now, you're going to get hit, unless, and this is the part where I have no idea how this is going to work out, unless the opponent is dodgy. And that is going to, I believe, have dodge tokens along with block tokens, which are going to absorb 50% of their next hit. I guess this makes it more balanced and straightforward, but it's making it really simple. So we'll see if it ends up being too simple or if there's actually a lot of diversity to that. Once again, I'll talk that Friday or Saturday. I have my own opinions of the tokens and the dodges and the damage and there's a lot of changes they made that I think are simplifying the game. I think the people of Darkest Dungeon were listening to the main complaints and maybe not the people who really enjoyed the game. Because a lot of people who complained about the game said it's way too complicated. And I feel like they took that and they've made it more character story rich and they have maybe, we don't know this, but maybe limited some of the stuff. But we'll figure it out if that's the case, or I could be completely wrong and it could still be your beautiful team up combos and all that good stuff. Because there's another line in here that says almost all the effects from the first game have been converted to tokens: immobilize, stun, bleed, blind, even team up a combo attack. So I'm not entirely sure what that means. He does think it gets people thinking a little bit more. A weird thought, and I never really thought about this, but he does make a mention. I'll read this directly. I found that it erodes the natural inclination we saw in the first game for people to just use damaging attacks all day long. I'm not sure what that's even supposed to mean, because yes, Darkest Dungeon was about destroying your enemy quickly and efficiently, so if you're telling me now I may have to do X, Y, Z to prep for a fight, I don't know if that's necessarily a trade-off that's going to work. I'll talk about more on Friday or Saturday, but I just like reading you these little nuggets from the director and team just so you can get an idea, once again, where they were going, what they want to go for, and what you can honestly expect. But at the same time, we do need to let the game come out, because some of these things may sound really good or really bad in the article, and once we get there, we really won't know how they actually play out, because we don't know how the dungeons go, we don't know how the gameplay is, we don't know if maybe you only get one of every character, but if someone dies, you get a new person. We don't know all this stuff yet, so we need to really dive into it a little more once the game's actually out. And this is the part that may drive people a little crazy. We're going to get into trinkets now, and they don't talk too much about the power in which trinkets work, but they do talk about the run trinkets. Obviously, in something like Hades and other roguelike games, you can pick up a weapon or equipment, and for that run, you're like, oh, this is the best thing I ever found. This game, you're going to keep it for a run like a traditional, and then you're going to lose it. So, once again, that may be your style, that may not be your style. I'll talk about that Friday and Saturday. This is another sentence directly from the guy as well. Once again, just trying to give insight. That's the fun of a true roguelike. Sometimes you have a run and you get a crazy item and you're like, I'm unstoppable. That's a really fun place to be as a player. He doesn't really mention the other side where sometimes, no matter what you do, you can't do a run well because you don't get stuff. And there's my opinion already poking through a little bit. But we'll talk about that. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of the roguelike setting, but if they at least make the trinkets really good and the bosses really good, I will be less weary of it at the moment. This one paragraph I'm going to read because I think it really kind of delves into the mindset and how the game's going to work. You're going to unlock skills and stuff in areas where you're going to learn stuff like in the first one. That is not out of the ordinary. You can swap out skills on the road between encounters. So it sounds like we're going to take a fight, go on the road. So acts may be like full dungeons now, where you take a fight in a quote-unquote room, and then you get in the stagecoach and you progress. So that may be the new dungeon fighting style. You fight, and instead of walking places, you take your little caravan, light your torches, keep your torch up as you go. Dungeons will be exceptionally larger, maybe about an hour to an hour and a half each, but the going between each stop, you're going to find other places like an inn, I believe, and stuff. So it's going to be a lot more pushing you forward and making you find places to rest rather than taking it at your own pace, which is once again the difference between a roguelike and what the first Darkest Dungeon offered. Now, here's the fun paragraph that may not be so fun to some of you. But Red Hook never giveth without taking things away. You can no longer have multiple copies of the same hero in your party. In each run, you'll have to choose from a bunch of heroes pre-rolled with a good and bad quirk. It's not like wizardry from the 1980s where you keep rolling until you get 18s across the board, says Sigmund. If you really want this leper run, but he's a pacifist or whatever, that makes you really choose. Now, what did I just say there? I don't really necessarily understand the rolling 18s across the board. Getting heroes out of the stagecoach in the first Darkest Dungeon wasn't particularly rolling people quote-unquote well. Most of your negative quirks and stuff got removed via Sanitarium, and then your good quirks came through just grinding. So I'm not sure where this just rolling thing came from. I guess you could argue you could roll for you could wait for heroes to come in with Warrior of Light and Photomania and then just stick them in a Sanitarium for 3 weeks. But you still had to stick them in there and lose money. It's not like you just picked them up one day and you're like, oh, best hero in the game, ready to go. So I'm a little weirded out by that, to be honest, but we'll talk about that more later. To kind of finish this off, I'm going to read a lot from the interview and all this stuff so you can get one last idea of this. So Darkest Dungeon, the first one, ended up with 18 classes. Darkest Dungeon 2 will grow, they say. It's coming to early access in Q3 2021. You'll be able to complete a run from the get-go. There's never going to be no under construction sign when you get to the end. It's kind of a funny joke. So you get a 5-act story. The first 4 acts, that were my bad, are going to be more of the roguelike structure. Then it sounds like the final act is going to be where, it's just going to be your ultimate craziness. So it's kind of like Darkest Dungeon, where you kind of do the normal dungeons and then you go into the final levels of the Darkest Dungeon. So I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit like that. The final level is going to be like nothing you've seen. It's going to get really crazy. So another thing is their team also grew from 5 to more than 20, he says. So that does allow for some of the things we mentioned before. Looking at hero skills a little more, the 3D models and all that stuff. So once again, the visual aspects were something that appeared to be very popular and big for the changes. In the final paragraph, and we'll kind of end the video here, is this game is more about trying to swim up and hoping you have enough air to break out the surface, and the fear that you experience when you realize that's just a little further out each time. So that's the roguelike structure, because in most roguelikes, you feel like you're barely always making it. When you get to the end of the game, you're really never in like great health or stuff, unless you're like super great at the game. But for the average individual, when you get to the end of the roguelike, often you're not doing great. So it's about trying to surface and trying to come to grips with your failures, but if you can manage to do it, there's a path to a better future, or at least to a better trinket. And I'm pretty sure that's where that ends. That's some of the big things. There are a few new skills, and I'll show just a couple, because I don't want to show the whole article and necessarily get in trouble. So we'll pick like one from the Highwayman here. So we'll do highway robbery. Destroys any positive tokens an enemy might have on them, leaving them wide open. I have no idea what that means, so I just kind of want to brain tease you on that. And then we still have point blank here. Places a combo token for a team up attack, but you can only hit the enemy when in the front row. So on so on. We get to that weird token team up thing. This may allow the relationship aspect and also the token aspect to really come into play here. So that is something we should look out for. Those are most of the big changes. There are some stuff I glossed over. I'm going to try my best throughout the video to show some of the art and stuff they're putting in. It's going to be interesting. I'm not sure how I entirely feel about it yet. What I will give Red Hook credit for is they did not do Darkest Dungeon 1.5, but part of me feels like they're not really doing Darkest Dungeon at all, other than the same heroes, which at this point could just be washes over of just generic characters you play in every other game. So it'll be interesting on how they balance the old game and how much of that they get rid of and how much of a new game they just do with a 3D skin over it, essentially. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're excited for the conversation with me and Shuffle in the future. And I'll tell you a little bit more on Saturday and Friday. Thank you.